Well, like Chrissy brought up, I mean, this didn't go through that process, right?
You know?
So some decisions are for the people and other decisions are not for the people.
And therefore, yeah, and I think it would be important for us to find out if there is, you know, like SOPs, terms of, you know, best practices and all that stuff. I have no idea. I wouldn't be able to.
Well, I mean, but then you look at the whole thing too, in terms of just the way things are moving forward in the community. If you talk about the proposed Justice Act, you got a mandate through that process somehow or
Right.
another. And some people have been critical that really the numbers of people who are actually non-connected community members, non-connected being to the Mohawk Council, employees of the Mohawk Council taking part in that, were fairly minimal. And then in general, it was fairly minimal, and the council itself. I mean, the Grand Chief was on television, he was on cable talking about the lack of response or the dwindling response,
Right.
people turning out to those things. But then you talk about something like the Justice Commission, and you want under what? You know, I mean, the questions are to be asked are like under what constitution, a constitution. I mean, the people who are driving that are saying, well, that's a good question to ask you about constitutions. But another question was, do we really need a constitution? Well, you know, I mean, on the one hand, it's like, what protects the people then?
I know, I think that, I give them credit for trying to do something, but when you're coming to a situation like that, it's not gonna be a collective, agreement with anybody. It's gonna be a collective agreement with whoever decides at the time that are going to be there, whatever topic that they're gonna discuss. But it's going to affect everybody, you know, maybe depending on the subject that they're talking about, it may affect everybody, and others, it may be more individualized. But what does that come down to at the end of the day? Well, how much teeth does it actually have? Making a law and not having it approved by anybody, you know, I'm not saying that unfortunately we have to have it approved by Indian Affairs and everybody else to make it a law and to make it being able to enforce it. Other than that, if it's just a community, we're gonna be back to where we are with a lot of the other laws, which makes it hard.
Hold that thought, all right? We're gonna think about this a little bit more. We have to take a break right now, but we will be back with more Straight Talk. So welcome back to Straight Talk, and we're going to continue our discussions about the ILCC, or what's now the LCC, and the whole process that we were discussing just before the break. So
Sorry, I just wanted to finish
Yeah, go ahead.
my
Your
thought.
train
Was
of
that I have a tough time with that whole process. The process I think is good, but how does it work at the end of the day? You know, it's a lot of money being spent on everything, but what happens at the end of it? You know what I mean? Is like the reason, I know the reasons why they're doing it is because there's not going to be any more justice of the peace, and then, you know, that they're going to be retired and they're not going to be replaced, and how is that going to work? I don't even know if they're sure on how that's going to work itself. So who replaces them? Who has the final decision? Is it going to be like an alternative dispute resolution? Is it, if you go through this process, you know what I mean? What happens if it doesn't come into my favor? You know what I mean? And that's how every other law in this community that we do. We make a law, and then as long as it runs smooth and nobody challenges it,
it's fine.
it's fine. Soon as one person challenges it, then
Everything falls apart.
Well,
then
isn't
you
that where
realize-
we're at with membership?
Exactly. So
And that's where
so-
we're at with membership, you know?
But-
You want to revisit all that stuff.
I think, again, it comes down to the whole idea of the collective right, and our collective rights to be able to make these decisions on our own. Whereas, for me, with the whole situation and questions that I have about this whole process is, all right, I understand why they do the process. They're trying to make it seem more adapted towards our community and our culture and stuff like that. But at the same time, I don't know if it's going to work, because it's like putting a Band-Aid over a really big sore, because the system that which it's built on, which is the colonial system, the whole government system, is not our system at all, and it's not going to work. And by trying to put something on the top, as in terms of a legislative body that's supposed to be traditionally based, is not really going to change what's basically underneath.
Well-
And to me, it's like, again, I think in all these like huge theology type of aspect, you know, and I get really confused because I still see the same thing, and I've heard it said, and I've had it said to me, and that's like, it's like putting lipstick on a pig. It's not the type of system that is
Okay. Now, let me just jump in, Chris, because you use the term seem, to make it seem like it is.
seem like, yeah.
And that raises, I think, a very important issue. Is I've talked to people who were involved at the outset, how this thing
Right.
was developed as part of the declaration to return to traditional government, to develop, and that there was a general consensus, I guess, at the table that that the community wasn't ready to move into a clan system.
Right.
I debate that. I question that. I don't think it's rocket science how to get past that, and regardless of whether everybody has a clan or not. You just set it up according to clans, and then invite whoever. It's not a problem that you don't have a clan. If your ancestry ties you to Kahnawake, then you're going to sit someplace, and we're going to be part of this process. Be that as it may, this was developed as a way to sort of move towards that along those lines. But now one of the questions is how did that change and what did it become? And one of the questions is does it become just a means to gain some stamp of approval from the government to move forward agendas to say it's about how do you gather consent, okay, from the governed to be governed?
Right.
Now, one of the things that I mean, obviously what they want to be able to do is say to the government is that these laws are valid or these decisions are valid because the people have directed us to do that, which is, this is a reasonable kind of an argument to make.
Right.
But when you talk about things like the judges, I mean, they use that because we're going to run out of judges. Don't forget, too, that under the Indian Act, since 1969, there's been a huge influx of dollars into Native communities. When the white paper failed, they flooded us with dollars. And so that was the birth, the development of large infrastructures, large organizations like what we have now with the Mohawk Council. The question now becomes, how do you maintain that flow of dollars? There are a lot of vested interests within that. It's a
Exactly.
huge part of the economy here is what comes from there. So in other words, how do you get your cake and you eat it too becomes a reasonable question to ask in terms of how and why these things are being done. Why don't we just say we have our own judges? Okay, but we want the federal dollars though.
Right.
So they want to be able to go to the government and say, no, regardless of what you say and you don't want to have this anymore, our people say we want to have this.
You keep mentioning people, but like who exactly are these people?
That's another,
Yeah,
Because,
that's
like,
it.
that's
You
what I-
don't even know who the players are.
But that's what I question in this whole process is, are people gonna participate in it? Like, is there gonna be like 20 people that are the people making our laws? Or?
Right, exactly.
It's been like that for a long,
And I mean,
long
there's
time.
there's a lot of,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of questions there. You know, like if, but like that, like who are the people who are going to be making these laws and stuff like that? Like, say, look at membership. They went through that whole like process, the largest consultation in our history, to get all these, the largest answers to all of our questions.
But they're not following it though, right?
no, they didn't follow it. But that's the problem, is they didn't follow it. But they say they did.
Right. And
You
who's
know-
to say that they didn't, though?
The
Well,
people who sat on the,
But
who
that's
did all
where
the consults.
but the responsibility of the population too, of the community, to say, to have, come on, let's have,
Yeah, yeah.
let's work at having collective memory. You know, so it's not left to one or two or three people to say, and then nobody remembers,
Right.
okay? That, no, wait a minute, this process did go through, and there was there was
And this is what
an
came up out
understanding
of
reach,
it.
and it was
Yeah.
supposed to be
Yeah.
this, and this is what came out instead. And you even have on record, and I know this because I worked for the Eastern Door, I was at Scrums, I went to, when that law was being finally enacted, you know,
Right.
that you had one chief who voted against it because it was nothing more than blood quantum in disguise, which it wasn't supposed to be.